Hey there, everybody. It's Kelly Filardo with the Grit, Guts, and Courage Show. And this is the show where we talk to people who have had to overcome something and how they did it. So today, my guest is Debra Kasowski. She is an amazing friend of mine, and I just can't wait to talk to her. So, Debra, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Kelly. It's always fun to come and join you.
It is. I know, exactly. And you've had me on your podcast a couple of times. So I was like, I have to have Debra on mine, of course. so,
Absolutely.
so, Debra, we're going to just jump right into it. So what's that story of grit, guts, and courage?
Wow. Well, as I was telling you before we jumped on, I'm still in the middle of it. And, the reason I said I could talk about it is I'm still not completely emotionally attached to it. So, usually I don't want to come on a show and say, oh my gosh, I'm going to dump all this stuff on, people who are listening, because you need to be able to process it and see kind of where you're at with it. So I have many little stories of grit and courage, but this one particularly hit me last January. I, had gotten my COVID vaccine. Have a healthcare background. So part of that was getting the vaccine. And then a week later, I got COVID. And a month later, I developed something called photophobia. And for people who don't know what that means, it's light sensitivity. I had the curtains drawn in my house. I was wearing sunglasses in my house. It was winter time. So the reflection from the snow outside, the sky, everything bothered me. So the phobia is kind of afraid of light. So it's not truly the correct term, but that's what they use. Like, I'm not afraid of light. I'm sensitive to the light. And I was sleeping in the basement because it was the darkest place in the house. And about 5 to 6 months later, my eyes started closing on their own, just at their own accord for 15 to 45 seconds at a time. And this, really kind of freaked me out because I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on. I had seen several neurologists, I've seen retinal specialists, and they had different diagnoses. Then they said it would, just run through my system. And then I discovered a gentleman named Dr. Farias, and he's out of Portugal. And he also works out of the University of Toronto. And he works with individuals who have dystonia. And that's partially what they, were thinking that I had, was something called blepharospasm. And because I had followed his protocol, I had seen improvements. Yet I still have a couple doctors who think that this will still work its way through my system. I was like, okay, there's no true, which way, do I want to abide by a label that resonates, or do I want to, truly push through? And I really believe that we can heal ourselves. And I have demonstrated to myself that, neuroplasticity is one of the most powerful things that our brains are pliable, and that we can recreate, pathways through repetition and practice and teaching ourselves to do new things. So it's been a crazy kind of year and a half. In the beginning, I had lots of emotion. I was like scared. First of all, didn't know what was going on. And then I went into self-judgment. Even my friends had caught me and said, Deb, I don't think I've ever seen you so self-conscious. Because I was, squinting. And, if you went on some of my videos on the YouTube channel, I thought, okay, this is where I'm at. I don't need to hide from anybody. If there's anybody watching the show, they had questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But that's where I was at. And I thought, do I stop the show? Do I stop the video? No, this is where I'm at. And it took me a lot, because I was like worried about judgment from other people. I was judging myself, thinking, oh my gosh, they're not going to be attracted to seeing this person like squinting all the time. Like, something's wrong with her? Is she about to seize, or is she having a migraine, is often what I've been asked. And so it's been a little bit, in the beginning, it was quite an emotional roller coaster. The hardest part for me initially was personally deciding that I would pause on my driving, and feeling like suddenly your independence was stolen. And that probably was the hardest of all of it, but I knew it was the safest thing. And then I'm one of those people who are like, I'm going to get the bus ticket. Nothing's going to stop me. And I will manage. It might be a little bit slower, but I'm going to get to where I want to get to. And I need to focus forward. And that's one of the biggest things is I could sit and, have some self-pity, or I can move into action. And that's one of the biggest things I realized. And that's part of my personality too. It's like, sit still. Not happening. There's always a way. I always find a way to make something work. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kelly will attest to this.
It's what's fascinating about it is that we hear so many people getting cancer, but we don't hear about people getting, what you got.
Yeah.
And so, and it's totally unknown. And there's probably you probably feel like there's nobody else going through what you went through.
It's an interesting thing because I do feel that some of the people around me don't understand what I'm going through, for sure. It is a rare condition, and even rarer when I realize that people don't really know what's going on. They're not sure. They're kind of like, let's try these things and let's do all these tests. All the tests that I've had have been normal. And it's basically a diagnosis based on patient history. Now, I did join a Facebook group, and there's a number of people, but there's such various degrees of symptoms. And these people are from all over the world. And I'm like, I don't know if I completely fit in with this. And some of it can be really negative. Some of it can be draining, but it's real. It's what people are going through, and they're having a platform to express themselves. But I know I had to moderate myself to ensure that I kept my mental health and my outlook focused. So when I would post something, I would post something that was my small win. I would post something that maybe was a bigger win. I would ask people to share what their wins are. So one of my wins, for example, was initially I said, okay, let me get the deal straight. I said, I'm having this blinking issues. Will I be able to wear contacts again? And one of the doctors like, well, Deb, I really don't think so. And I'm like, as soon as someone says it to me, I'm like, watch me. It took me a good 9 to 12 months before I dove into doing that, because we weren't sure what was completely, going on. And today I'm wearing my contacts. So I like to share my wins when I can. Yeah. But it's like, okay, if I can do that, then what else can I do? When I go for a walk, for example, in my house, there's days that if I'm really tired, I will walk into a wall, even though I know where everything is. And I'm like, oh, hello, or I'll go for a walk and I will realize that I'm not straight on the sidewalk. I might be walking onto the grass, but I know that movement. I was watching a video last night with Dr. Norman Deutsch, who wrote the book, The Brain Can Heal Itself. And he was talking about how exercise is so healing, that movement. Dr. Farias, same thing. Movement is healing. And I find that when I make sure I get those walks in, I am doing better. It might not be perfect, but I'm doing better. And I'm working on running short distances again, because I have done 2 marathons. And, my method to madness, a few years ago, I was running 5, 10K races. And then one day I signed up for a half marathon, and my friend messaged me. She goes, what made you decide to do that? I'm like, it's next thing. I've never thought about it, but sure, I'll do it. So I went to Calgary, and I live in Edmonton, and I've never run there before. And I knew wherever I parked my car, I had to get back to my car. So whether I was running or walking, there was this method to my madness that you have to get back. So I completed this Diva half marathon. And then I went and signed up for the Edmonton Marathon. And then someone said, again, what made you do that? Like, did you ever want to do a marathon? I was like, no, never in a million years. If you would have asked me 20 years ago, I'd say you're crazy. Yeah. But in my head, everything's considered done. Once you put your ink to the paper, once you make that commitment to yourself, it was done. the interesting thing is my family thought I was running a half marathon, and I didn't tell them. I didn't correct them. I didn't even tell them that I was running the marathon until actually the night before, because I didn't want someone to say, hey, are you doing your training? Hey, are you eating properly? I knew what I needed to do. And there's some goals I share with people to be accountable. And then there's goals that I don't share. And until, the night before. And I had, it was very funny because I had left my husband a message. He was in a road ride, a fundraiser with my son. And I thought if I would have told them, they would have canceled it to be there at the end. And I'm like, no. This one is for me. This race is for me. I needed to prove to myself that I only validation I needed was for myself. So I would train, and I trained up to, I think it was 22K. And he's like, oh, you don't need to run anymore. You've already hit your half marathon. You're fine. You're doing great. And I just, would smile to myself. The night before, I had messaged my family, and I said, I have a confession to make, and found out people's phones were dead. And the next day I was, I know, I was 7K into the race, and I get this message that says, confess what? So I paused for a moment. I said, I'm running a marathon. And they're like, what? Oh my gosh, good for you. And I'm like, talk to you later. I'm busy. And, it was one of the biggest challenges of my life. I got to 36K. I had a friend, she was kind of coaching me by text, and another one messaging me saying, you got this, you had 3 kids, you can do this, And I got to 36K, I hit the wall. I could not get my brain to get my legs to run.
Wow.
And I was just like, what the heck is happening? And my girlfriend looked over, she goes, we're not getting paid for this. So one foot in the front of the other, and let's just keep going. I knew I could walk, but what I just couldn't get my head to say, okay, let's move fast. I could not get there. So we walked it in for the last, 6K, and another girlfriend, she had done a half. She went and showered and changed and boosted her phone, and she came and joined us the last kilometer. So she was taking pictures, and I was getting closer. I could see the finish line, and my girlfriend's like, we're about 500 meters. Can you do it? And all of a sudden inside me, I could do it. Right. I started running to the finish line. My girlfriend's taking pictures, and I get there, and the volunteer holding my medal. And guess what? There was almost nobody around. So self-predicting, that was my finish line, nobody waiting for me. So it was perfect. It was exactly how I had predicted it. Right.
Right.
And the volunteer looks over at my friend, and he says, is that her first one? And she's like, yeah. And here I am. I come up, and he goes, can I give you a hug? And I'm like, I could feel my emotions. And he whispers in my ear, and he goes, it was a long way, wasn't it? And that's what I think about many of the journeys that we have in life, right? Even what I'm going through right now, I in my heart of hearts, I feel that I'm going to get over this. I just don't know the length of time, and I have to trust that my body knows when everything will be. Mm-hmm. But there's times we think, gosh, this is taking a lot longer than I thought. But then in hindsight, I look back and I understand why it took the length of time that it did. It might have been that I needed to change a narrative that I was telling myself about my abilities. It might have been that I needed to push myself beyond what I thought I was capable of before I could say, hey, what's the big deal? It's just another race, one foot in front of the other. Like it was, for me, it was never about the time. It was never about it. It was about finishing,
Right.
And sometimes I think we're in such a race to get to the end, but what's the end? Yeah. I want to be there to be present in every moment, to seize every moment and see what I am capable of.
I love that because, you and I were in New York together, and you ran that marathon in Christmas time. And I'm like, you're just crazy.
Well, it was right after that. It was right after that. And I had not run. I just looked at that we were going to New York, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what races are going on. Oh, only a half marathon. haven't trained, but yeah, let's do it.
And I remember, you getting up at like 5 in the morning and it was cold out. And I'm like,
Yeah.
crazy woman. But, I was so proud of you for doing
Oh,
it because, I wouldn't have, you know, and I
yeah.
thought, good on you. It's winter, it's cold. We're in New York. You don't even know where we're at type of thing. And
Yeah.
yet, you're willing to go and do this. And I even remember, like, even the night before, you thought, well, maybe I won't do it.
Yeah.
I remember us having that conversation and you're like, no, I'm going to do it because it's all about that commitment thing for you.
Yeah.
And
And that's the biggest thing, Kelly. And, I know we've talked about, writing books and, podcasting, but the thing is, the biggest message is keeping the promises that you make to yourself. When we don't keep the promises we make to ourselves, it's like chopping down a tree. We have all these little promises that we break, and then we get to a point where we fail to trust ourselves anymore. And we lose sight of what we were once capable of, because we might have been able to accomplish so many great things. And suddenly life throws us this curveball and you're like, what the heck just happened? Feels like somebody took the carpet and said, no more, you're on your butt. And you got to get the strength to pull yourself up, dust yourself off and say, look in the mirror and say, okay, you got this. You got this. You can do this. And it was really interesting because it was March of this year. I was at the Women in Wealth Gala here in Edmonton, and I was talking to the MC, Carrie Dahl, and I was telling her what was going on. I said, when's the right time to kind of share a story? And she just looked me straight in the eye and she's like, you have the strength to get through this. And there is someone out there who needs to hear what you're going through, to give them the strength and the courage and the grit and the guts to be out in the open, to have the vulnerability to say, it's not all perfect right now. But I'm still not going to hide. There's so many times, Kelly, people would invite me to a networking event and I'd be like, I just wanted to isolate myself.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, people are going to come up and ask me questions. They're going to come up and say, what's going on with you? Are you okay? Should we call somebody? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm not in any pain. My eyes close they're closed when I listen to you. But when I start talking, they open. It's the most bizarre thing ever. And I just got to the point of like, no, I need to educate you. Whether it be me or someone else that you're looking at or wondering about, how about just stay curious, be open, find out what's going on with them. Maybe there's something that you can do, and maybe it's only a word of encouragement, but that's all they needed that day, because you don't know how many people have been staring or asking questions or wondering what's going on.
Or how many people are hiding because
Yeah.
they don't want to put themselves out there because they're concerned. I mean, I get that in the burn community, right?
Yeah.
Burnt as a 2-year-old. There's people out there that when something happened to them, especially as an adult, they're like, I don't want to be involved in society, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be there. I don't want to put myself out there. And then there's other people like me that are like, you know what? I don't give a shit what anybody's thinking of me. I don't care that they're staring at me. I'm going to do whatever I want to do in my life. So, it's so good that you are putting yourself out there, even though you've got something going on.
Yeah. And there's days like, I'm like, no, I just want to stay home. I don't feel up to it. And then I'm like, but what am I going to miss out on? Right. And for me, I want to live fully. I want to love fully. I want to dive into all the experiences I can, except for jumping out of a plane. I'll leave that one to you. I have no interest. But the things that I'm interested in and curious about, I want to be able to seize those experiences because they build who I am. And I think about that now when I've now done 2 marathons. And I've walked a half marathon because with the eyes, I was like, well, I'm already signed up. What's the point of, and I hadn't trained either, but I know I can walk. So I walked with a friend for 4 hours. We walked and talked and listened to music. And I'm like, how hard was that? Right? I got the same medal as everybody else. And I pushed myself beyond what I thought was capable.
And that's the key thing. right? Is pushing
Yeah.
ourselves, moving forward, right?
Yeah. And we give ourselves limits, right? It's our perceived limit that we truly are putting our own ceilings often ourselves. I was talking with a friend the other day, and I realized a story that I had when I was like 13 years old. We had a truck that you'd back up to round bales, and it'd have these prongs. And when you'd go back, it would plug into the bale and bring it to the back of the truck. My dad was trying to get me to help him on the farm, and I backed up like 3-4 times, and I could see he was getting frustrated. And I was like, how come I can't do this? And he just said, he said, Deb, just turn the truck off, go inside and help your mother in the kitchen. Except what I told myself, he didn't say this, but what I told myself is, you're not capable. You don't have the ability to do this. And it's not until like recently that I realized how I'm like, where did that story show up in other areas? And then I'm like, wow. But now I have a new story. I have a new ending that I've created to that narrative. Is I envision that 13-year-old Debra backing up, getting it, putting the bale on, turning off the car and jumping out and going, yes, I did it. And now that's the story that I carry with myself. Because if anybody has repeated and practiced, they say it takes up to 10,000 hours to really improve and be the expert in a field. Well, 3 or 4 times backing up to a bale is not going to make me no expert. But if I can believe that I have the ability and capability, I'm going to have the grit. I'm going to give myself the grace, and I'm going to have the guts to push through as many times as it takes till I get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Sometimes we don't know what the story is that's holding us back. And
I had no idea. So it seems so insignificant, but I remember it. And I was like, I don't remember him. He never was angry. He was, he was just like, Deb, maybe this is something not for you, right? Kind of thing, in a very gentle way. And now I'm going to learn how to change oil. There's all these things. And it's not that I'm saying that I'm going to change oil on a regular basis. I just want to do it once to say that I have, right? So it's these things that maybe people have identified as gender roles that I want to challenge myself to say, yeah, I can do it. But do I need to do it regularly? No. But it's putting yourself out there, not isolating yourself from opportunity, because the only one that misses out is me. Everyone else around me is moving forward with their own lives. And we've talked about this too, Kelly, many times, that, we think everybody's paying attention to us, but they're really in their own heads, worried about their own lives. And think of it, there's 7 billion people in the world walking around wondering if they're okay, wondering if they're enough. Everybody has their own evolution, but we all have a story of different experiences that we've attached meaning to. And that emotion that is in those events and experiences defines how we see the world.
Yeah.
Yet we don't realize the person beside us has all these different thoughts about their capabilities.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's we worry so much about what other people are thinking of us, and they're not even thinking of us. They're they're thinking about themselves, or they look at you and they think about you for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then they're back to thinking about themselves. So
and when they are thinking about you, because I know, Kelly, we were in New York and we went to the little girl in, standing there with the Imagine sign on the ground. They're thinking about you when they see you having fun, right? When you're having fun, they're standing there thinking, man, I would like to do something like that.
Yeah.
That's when they're thinking about you. That's when they're reflecting on their own lives, thinking, you know what, they look like they're having a blast. I need some of that in my life, right?
Yeah.
So live as an example. Put yourself out there, and you teach the world by leading through example.
Okay, so how can people work with you? What's the work you do? I want to know what you're up to nowadays and how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I am a speaker. which Kelly and I have shared the stage on different occasions. I've done TEDx. So speaking is one of my jams, of course. And I also am an author of 3 books, and you can find them on Amazon. Just type in my name and you will see books pop up. And I also am an executive coach working with life, business, and leadership to help support you in reaching your dreams and your goals, helping progress your organization forward. You know, it really takes working with individuals and teams to grow into what we need, but all change begins with the individual. And as we move together and, you know, working together with other people, I've dedicated my life to serving others to live fully, to reach their goals and dreams, and to really achieve amazing things. And you can go over to my website at www.debrakasowski.com. That's DEBRAKASOWSKI.com. And you can listen to my podcast or go on to my YouTube channel. I would love some more subscribers, and I would love for you to send me any messages of new content you'd like to see.
Okay, awesome. And Deb, any final words of wisdom you'd like to share?
My words of wisdom would be, put yourself out there. You know, no matter what you're going through, it is your hard. And it might not be hard for someone else. Everybody has different degrees of what that hard looks like. But know that your heart is your heart, and you can break it down into smaller, manageable pieces. And what it's going to take you to do is to keep your commitments to yourself, keep those promises to yourself, but also give yourself some grace. So you're going to have some grit, you're going to have some grace, and it's going to take a lot of guts.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Deb. So there you go. That's another episode of the Grit, Guts, and Courage Show. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you for having me. This was fabulous.
You're very welcome.